So, today, we're going to dive into a really pivotal moment in history. It's the story of Umar ibn al-Khattab's incredible shift from being this brilliant military leader to a truly visionary state builder. And this isn't just a story about winning battles. Nope, it's about what happens after the fight is over. How do you actually turn a victory into a lasting, stable state?
I mean, just try to put yourself in his shoes for a second. You've just pulled off one of the fastest, most successful military expansions in human history. The old superpowers, Persia and Byzantium, they've been humbled. You've got all this new territory from Syria all the way to Iraq now under your control. The question is just massive. After you win, what do you do next? How in the world do you govern all this?
And the challenge was just immense. I mean, we're not just talking about managing empty land here. This was about governing all sorts of different people, new economies, and really their entire futures. They needed a system, and they needed it fast, because the old way of doing things was already starting to clash with this brand new reality.
Okay, and this is where it gets really interesting. You've got this core conflict. For centuries, the traditional way, the rule of thumb, was super simple. You conquer land, you divide it up among your victorious soldiers as spoils of war. Easy. But Umar, he was thinking on a totally different timeline. He started asking these tough questions. Hey, if we give everything away right now, what's going to be left for our kids? Who's going to pay to defend the borders tomorrow?
So this dilemma, it didn't lead to some top-down decree. Instead, it kicked off this period of really deep thought and consultation. And this was way more than just a political debate. It was a genuine search for a just and sustainable path forward.
One of his closest companions, Mu'adh bin Jabal, hit him with this really stark warning. Just look at the foresight here. He's saying, look, if you divide up the land, it's all going to end up concentrated in the hands of a few people. And then the generations that come after them, they'll find nothing left. He was basically talking about intergenerational equity, a concept we're still wrestling with today.
And Umar's response to this, wow, it's a masterclass in leadership. He didn't just force his own view on everyone. Nope. The sources tell us he just said, consult others. He brought together the elders, the companions, and he made it really clear that this decision had to be a collective one. It had to be based on principle, not on his personal power or what seemed easiest at the moment.
So this whole process of consulting and personal reflection, it really became the turning point. The search for an answer wasn't just happening in a council of men. Umar was looking for something more, a timeless principle he could build an entire state on.
So what does he do? He goes back to the source. He starts this deep dive into the verses of the Qur'an, really pondering every single word. And as the sources tell it, his search eventually brings him to a chapter called Surah al-Hashr. And it's there that he finds the ethical foundation he'd been looking for.
This verse right here, this is the key. It lays down this fundamental economic idea. The wealth of the state, it can't just be hoarded by a tiny, rich elite. It has to circulate. It has to benefit the entire community. This was the first piece of the puzzle. And then, this verse. This is the one that seals the deal. The scripture extends the rights to this wealth, not just to the people who are there right now, the soldiers, the poor, the orphans, but explicitly to those who came after them. That was it. That was the divine mandate for thinking about the long term. So, with that scriptural backing, the decision was made. And honestly, it was revolutionary. The huge conquered lands of Iraq and Syria, they would not be chopped up and given away as private property. Instead, they would be kept as a public trust, an amanah, for the good of every single citizen, both present and future.
But look, a principle is one thing. How do you actually make it work? How do you build a system to uphold it? So let's take a look at the incredible architecture of justice they put together.
All right, so the first pillar of this new system was the kharaj. Now, this was a tax that was put on the land itself. So instead of a one-time bonus for the soldiers, the kharaj created this steady, permanent flow of income for the public treasury. This was literally the engine that would fund the state for generations to come.
The second pillar was the jizyah. This was a tax paid by the non-Muslim citizens who were living under the state's protection. And it was a two-way street. In return for paying this, they were exempt from having to serve in the army, and the state guaranteed the protection of their lives, their property, and their right to practice their own faith. Now, you might be thinking, this system sounds kind of rigid, right? Not at all. And the case of the Banu Taghlib tribe shows this perfectly. They were a really powerful Christian Arab tribe, and they felt the word jizya was demeaning. They flat out refused to pay, and even threatened to go join the Byzantines. So what did Omar do? Instead of forcing a fight, he showed this incredible pragmatism.
He agreed that they could pay the same amount, but just call it a double zakah. The name was different, but the public good was served, and a potential enemy became a peaceful part of the state. It was brilliant.
So you see, these groundbreaking policies, the kharaj, the flexible jizyah, this wasn't just about collecting money. This was about building a society that was durable, that was just, and that actually functioned for everyone.
And you can see the direct results right here. It's like a chain reaction. First, that stable income from the taxes allowed them to organize the very first comprehensive census, to actually figure out who the citizens were and what they needed. And that, in turn, funded huge public works projects. We're talking maintaining roads, building bridges, digging canals. This was the birth of state infrastructure, all paid for by a system that was designed to last.
But for me, this one quote, it just captures the entire spirit of this whole transformation. Umar is saying that the system should be so just and so efficient that even the most remote citizen you can imagine, a shepherd way out in Yemen, will get his rightful share from the state's wealth without ever having to ask or beg for it. That is a profound vision of social responsibility. And that, of course, brings us right back to today. This incredible story of state building from the 7th century leaves us with a really critical question for our own time. In a world that is so often focused on the short term, how do we design our economies, our environmental policies, our societies to truly serve those who come after? It's a challenge that is just as relevant now as it was then. It really makes you think, doesn't it?